Top 10 things going through Marco Rubio's mind. Number 10, smooth.
It would have been less awkward had he been wearing one of these on his head during the speech.
Oh my God, I asked for sparkling water.
You tweeted out the water bottle yourself. You got it there again. You showed an ability to laugh at yourself. Do you have anything to add to that tweet from last night?
I needed water. What am I going to do? It happens.
We'll get to the Watergate in a second. But the serious news with Marco Rubio was this White House immigration plan that leaked overnight and his, pretty strong attack against it. I got to ask you, Congressman Castro, even your Democratic colleague from Texas, Congressman Cuellar, said that it would be better if the president would let Congress take the lead on this. Is the White House botching the effort to get a bipartisan deal here?
Well, remember, this was leaked, so it's not something that the White House rolled out, and it's also clear that it's incomplete. So I think, look, it's important that every branch of government, the executive and the legislative branch, both work on this. And I also think there's a silver lining in this, which is that there are a lot of commonalities between the two plans, including a path to citizenship. So there's a lot to work with there.
But let me ask you what I asked Dennis McDonough, why have they even talked to Rubio about this?
Well,
I mean, the only people that have gone down to the White House, it's all Democrats.
Sure. Well, and I think because all of that is still in the process. It hasn't happened yet. It will happen before something is acted upon, and certainly before something is passed.
Stuart.
Well, I hope that they speak to the senator about it, because to have success here, you have to have a plan that passes and that has not only the votes to get it, but it has a consensus of support among the people. And that's the great missing element here, is a consensus of what needs to be done. And you have a moment here that's been created. It's a tremendous opportunity for the president to show leadership here. You have a senator in Marco Rubio who is showing, I think, true courage here and trying to solve a problem. They should go forward and not just stall here.
And George, I have to say, the White House seems genuinely irritated that this leaked. As you can imagine.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, there's a great consensus on the two really contentious issues that have bedeviled us for a generation. First, the 11 million people who are here are not going to be deported and are not going to self-deport. The American people would not tolerate the police measures necessary to extract from our community these people, a majority of whom have been here 5, 6, 7, 8 or more years. Second, we need immigrants. We need them for seasonal labor. We need them for construction industries. There are all kinds of industries dependent on this. So we have the consensus on this. The problem is not stopping the flood from Mexico. It stopped 2 years ago. The Mexican economy, furthermore, is doing better than ours is. And as it grows, it's going to solve the immigration problem largely that way.
More than any fence can.
More than any fence can, exactly.
So you brought up the phrase self-deport. So I want to flash back here, since we've got a little bit of a Republican primary reunion, to that moment in the Republican primary when Mitt Romney brought this issue up.
So if you don't deport them, how do you send them home?
Well, the answer is self-deportation, which is people decide that they can do better by going home because they can't find work here because they don't have legal documentation to allow them to work here. And so we're not going to round people up.
Okay, Speaker Gingrich, how much damage did Mitt Romney do, not just to his own election prospects there, but to the Republican brand with how he handled that issue?
Oh, I think that and the 47% comment were fatal. If you look at the polling data from Univision and others, the minute he got into self-deportation, both Asian Americans and Latino Americans said, "Don't talk to me about jobs. You're going to deport me. You think my grandmother's going to go home? I mean, don't talk to me." And you couldn't break through. And look at the last ad that the Obama campaign ran in Spanish for the last 3 weeks of the campaign. It was just Mitt Romney.
And John, I think the Republican Party understands that, and that's why I think there is going to be immigration reform. The president wants it. It's really his top legislative priority. The Republican Party wants it for the reason that it would like to regain the presidency at some point. But Congressman Ryan, in his interview with you, used the phrase delicate balance. And there are two delicate balances here. The first is the balance of whether the degree to which the president inserts himself into the process, the legislative process, or whether he holds back. For the White House, there's a little bit of a rerun of health care here, where they held back too long and let the process slip away. But they've been urged to stay out a little bit, so you have that back and forth. The other delicate balance is the degree to which the Republican Party can bring itself to do what it knows it needs to do in terms of comprehensive immigration reform. And so I think the unhappiness that Senator Rubio expressed also reflected the delicate nature of how far Republicans can go in creating that pathway to citizenship.
Let me say something. Republican Party had a problem with Hispanic voters before this primary. I don't think it got better during the primary, certainly. And I think that...
I mean, it got worse.
That's regrettable. But if you look at the numbers, it didn't get significantly worse. The greatest appeal that the Obama campaign had for Hispanic voters turned out to be Obamacare. And they ran a tremendous amount of their advertising appealing to Hispanic voters. It was the only place in their advertising where they talked about Obamacare, was into the Hispanic community, because an extraordinary percentage of Hispanic voters are uninsured. And that was smart politics. They did it well. The party was also known as the party that was against Obamacare, and that hurt us. There's not one solution here for the problems that Republicans have with Hispanic voters. And
it's not like immigration suddenly solves it.
And I hope and pray we can get through this stage and we can come to some sort of consensus here and go forward.
But George, immigration's a big part of this. And were you struck by how kind of over the top Marco Rubio's response was to this? I mean, it was a draft. It wasn't, the White House wasn't putting it out, and he, came out ablazing on this.
Yes, I'd like to see the details of what he finds in it that is offensive or left out that is important to add to it. In that sense, it strikes me as this may tell us something about the many pressures, conflicting pressures on Marco Rubio. He's been on the cover of Time magazine, anointed the savior of the Republican Party. That's a big lot of pressure. And I'm sure he has heard from members of the Republican Party, some of whom do not want to be saved with the kind of immigration reform he has in mind.
And Jonathan, I would point out, I think that's right. I think his response was very eager. I think within 30 minutes after USA Today broke that story, they had put something out. I think it'd be better to be constructive, to actually get with the White House, get with the Democratic folks in Congress, and figure out what we can do to work together on this.
But go ahead.
Well, and I would also say that as far as immigration goes, I think healthcare, education, other issues for the Latino community are very important, just like all Americans. But they do use, I think, that immigration issue to sort out who the good guys and bad guys are in politics. So it's not just tone, but it's also the policies that were passed in Arizona, in Alabama, in Georgia, and those aren't going away for a while.
Yeah, but I think there's a very important part of this that the Obama administration probably can't bring itself to deal with. An Obama immigration plan is not going to pass the House.
He needs a Rubio Obama plan.
I'm just saying, just start from just as a Bush Social Security plan after 2004 was dead because it was the Bush Social Security plan. So if you want to actually get legislation,
will a Rubio immigration plan pass the House?
I think a Rubio and the House Republicans and House Democrats have been meeting on immigration. I mean, I think there will be a House immigration bill that has a very substantial support that Boehner and Cantor and others will be supporting. And I think that negotiated with a Senate immigration bill that has to have bipartisan support could actually get to the president's desk. But an Obama plan led and driven by Obama in this atmosphere, with the level of hostility towards the president and the way he goads the hostility, I think it's very hard to imagine that his bill is going to pass the House.
Well, Newt brings up actually the really interesting leadership conundrum of Obama, because on the one hand, you have Republicans at times demanding that the president lead and demanding the president's plan, and then you have the reality on the ground that when the president does lead, the answer is no way.
It becomes radioactive.
Because it's, yes. And so go ahead.
That has become a litmus test for the president. Is this about politics or is it about passing a bill?
Right.
Because you have in Senator Rubio someone who really is doing something here extraordinary, trying to. And he could be a partner in this process to help get it through.
Right, but what I'm saying, Stu, is if the
president... And you're going to use that person and try to help and work with them and lower the temperature to all of this and not be leaking plans and not be calling bluffs and try to get something done. You could get, this is a moment.
Well, we don't know who leaked, and the question, I am a big believer in working together, and I'm a big believer in reaching out. I also think Newt's exactly right. If you reach out too publicly, if you embrace too much, you're going to doom your plan, and so it's very complicated, and especially because of the cross pressures on Rubio and the Republican Party that George mentioned.
If the president wants any substantial legislative achievement in the next 4 years, and every hour that passes, his power begins to leach away, it's got to be this. Go back to, it's as distant as the Peloponnesian Wars now, but go back to Tuesday night's speech. He says he's going to redesign our high schools. No, he didn't. He says he's going to have manufacturing hubs, which is a recipe for dozens, scores of cylinders along the way, and more crony capitalism. He says we're going to double down on Head Start. We have 47 years of experience with Head Start, and we know that all the good is dissipated by the third grade. None of that's going to happen. This could happen.
So the stakes are extremely high for the Republicans here, not just the president in terms of a legislative achievement. We have this much talked about Republican reboot. I want to take a look at the New York Times Magazine has a cover story today on the Republicans and their problem with technology. And Stuart, this quote caught my eye. Romney's senior strategist, Stuart Stevens, may well be remembered by historians as the last guy to run a presidential campaign who never tweeted.
Believe me, if I had tweeted in this campaign, this whole discussion we've been having about the Second Amendment would probably be replaced with one about the First Amendment and whether or not it should actually apply to tweeting. Listen, I don't think that it would be a great mistake if we thought that technology in itself is going to save the Republican Party. Technology is something, to a large degree, you can go out and purchase. And if we think that there's an off-the-shelf solution that you can go out and purchase for the Republican Party, it's wrong. You know, we've had a lot of chance now since the campaign to spend time with the Obama folks. And sometimes they had better technology. In some cases, we have better technology. We don't have a 140-character problem in the Republican Party. We have a larger problem that we have to look at and be patient about it. And trying to think that there's one solution like this, I just don't think it's.
Are we ever going to get you on Twitter, though?
We can discuss that.
So no, you disagree with this. You think there's a big technology problem.
But I think the way Stuart just said it is exactly right. The technology problem is a culture problem. I mean, the Democrats had 54 data analysts and were hiring PhDs in advanced math because they were using the most advanced decision processes in the country. They were bringing in behavioral scientists. They were trying to figure out how do you talk to 311 million people and do so in a way that you can survive 8% unemployment and get reelected. And it worked. Now, I think it's actually, he's right in the sense it's a cultural problem. None of our consultants would have imagined hiring 54 people in the decision area. None of them would have imagined having 24 people, did nothing full-time except emails, and then blind tested the best emails to see which ones worked. I mean, they are a Super Bowl team that we ought to respect deeply. And we are currently a mid-level college team floundering around. And I agree, it's not just, you can't just go out and buy this. This is a fundamental rethinking of how you relate to the American people. And frankly, most of it, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, I thought Election Day we'd win. I couldn't imagine this economy and Obama getting reelected. And that made me think, if your airplane hits the mountain, maybe you better buy new radar.
Yeah, you definitely had a radar issue there. Hey, I very quickly, because I want to move on.
The Republican Party's technology problem is a little like its immigration problem. It's necessary, but not sufficient for it to get up to speed on those things. It won't help it win. I think about the Republican Party like the old joke about how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb. The light bulb has to change. The Republican Party has to decide it wants to change.
So I want to move on to this dust-up over Chuck Hagel. And George, the Republicans delayed this. I don't really understand what's going on in the Senate because a lot of those who voted against having the vote said, no, I'll let it happen in 2 weeks. Are the Republicans playing a dangerous game here by blocking Hagel and Brennan, defense and CIA, when they know that both of them are ultimately going to be confirmed?
Well, because they do know that, and because most sensible Republicans believe that a president is owed vast deference in picking his cabinet, because the cabinet leaves when he leaves and the cabinet exists to implement his policies. Neither is true of judicial appointments, for example. Now, Chuck Hagel took that principle and made it really hard to subscribe to with this appalling performance in his hearing. Nevertheless, if the president wants a terrible Secretary of Defense, he's got a right to him. And I think he'll get him. No,
there's an endorsement. So why are the Republicans playing this game?
Well, but there's a secondary part of this, which I think George would subscribe to. The Constitution divides power. This is one of the first occasions where you see the Republicans in the Senate get together and say, you know, we want to remind the executive branch that you have to have some deference to us. I mean, Lindsey Graham's point is, tell us the rest of the Benghazi story. Other folks would like to know more about where did Hagel's money come from. And I don't find it unseemly to say to a potential Secretary of Defense or Secretary of the Treasury, tell me what you've been doing, where your money's come from while you've been out of public office.
Okay, but Jonathan, let me point out also that you had North Korea doing its nuclear test. We've got a drawdown on Afghanistan, all of these very significant issues. And Chuck Hagel is being asked about speaking fees that he may have received 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
May or may not have received. And I want to show you the one guy more than any other that has blocked this is the new Senator Ted Cruz. He's barely been in office a little over a month. And listen to this exchange he had with John McCain.
It is at a minimum relevant to know if that $200,000 that he deposited in his bank account came directly from Saudi Arabia, came directly from North Korea.
Senator Hagel is an honorable man. He has served his country, and no one on this committee in any time should impugn his character or his integrity.
Now, Cruz went on to say, I don't have any evidence that money's come from North Korea, but I mean, this is a fellow member of the Texas delegation.
Sure, and I've met Ted, and he's always been nice to me, but that was quite frankly shameful to suggest that somebody that was a decorated veteran in Vietnam, who was wounded and hurt for his country, was not loyal to his country. I think really is quite harsh and had no place there.
He's not running for Senator Congeniality, and he doesn't much care. There was no predicate for suggesting that money came from North Korea or any other scary, horrible country. And as the former Solicitor General of Texas, he ought to know better than that. If you look at this Cruz story the Hagel story more broadly, if Washington wanted to come up with a way to look worse, I can't imagine one. First of all, I'm with George. The president is entitled to his nominee, but his performance, I was going to go with execrable, but I'll settle for appalling. It was an appalling performance. Okay. And now the Republicans just want to make themselves look even more obstructionist with a country that's frustrated with that. I mean, come on. Confirm the guy. Don't like him, but vote against him.
This is just such Washington nonsense. You look at what Democrats did to Clarence Thomas. You look at what Democrats did to Judge Bork. You look at the 3 months that the John Tower was hung out to dry by the Senate.
You're not endorsing that behavior.
No, but
though.
I'm saying this to have this brand new standard. No matter how stupid Chuck Hagel is, no matter how bad his performance, no matter how much he keeps in secret, we all know he's an honorable man. How do we know that?
All right, well, we are unfortunately out of time. This was a great roundtable. Thank you very much for joining us, Congressman Castro, Newt Gingrich, Stuart Stevens, Ruth Marcus, and George Will. Really appreciate your time.